A perfect half-moon floated in a perfect blue sky in the early morning. Extended banks of cloud, like long French loaves, glowed pink as the sun emerged. Silk Road. In this chapter, Nick Middleton describes his journey to Mount Kailash. Let's start. Now that we were leaving Ravu, Lamo said she wanted to give me a farewell present. Lamo is a member of the family where the author had stayed in Ravu. As now the author was leaving the place, Ravu, Lamo wanted to give him a farewell present. One evening, I told her through Daniel that I was going to Mount Kailash to complete the Korah. Now, you will ask me, what is the Korah? Korah means making a revolution around a sacred or holy place. It also refers to meditation performed by Tibetan Buddhists. The author wants to complete the Korah. When I told Lamo through Daniel that I was going to Mount Kailash to complete the Korah, she said that I should get some warmer clothes. She came out of her tent carrying a long-sleeved sheepskin coat. As I and Daniel entered into the car, the driver, Seaton, looked at me. Ah, yes, Jokba, sir. Why did he say the author is Jokba? Jokbas are the nomads who wander in the Tibetan region. But why does Seaton say the author as a Jokba? Jokbas wear sheepskin coats. As the author was wearing one, Seaton declared him a Jokba. I am taking a shortcut to get off the Changtang. This route will take us to southwest, that is almost directly towards Mount Kailash. It involves several fairly high mountain passes. But no problem, sir, if there is no snow. What is the likelihood of snow there? Not knowing, sir, until we get there. From the gently rolling hills of Ravu, the shortcut took them across vast open plains, which were empty. Only some gazelles were there. The gazelles would look up, from nibbling, means biting the dry pastures, would contract their eyebrows, and run away. Further on, where the plains became more stony, a great herd of wild ass came into view. We are approaching the herd, much before they appear. Kiang. The herd of wild ass was running in groups, turning, as if they were practicing maneuvers, on some predetermined course. Means, the herd was running in a way, as if they were learning the skill. Because of their running, plumes of dust waved, in the crisp, clean air. Pointing the pall of dust, Seaton said it as, Kiang. The wild ass of Tibet are called, Kiang. As hails started to come up once more, they saw Drukbas, taking their flocks of sheep. Sometimes men, sometimes women, they would pause, and stare at the car, and wave as they passed. When the car got close to their animals, the sheep would run away. Then, they passed nomad stark tents, which were set in splendid isolation. There was a huge black dog, a Tibetan mastiff, guarding the tents. These beasts would turn their big heads when they became aware of the car approaching. As the car came closer, they would explode into action, speeding towards the car, like a bullet from a gun. These shaggy, means hairy monsters, blacker than the darkest night, usually wore bright red collars, and barked furiously with huge jaws. They were completely fearless of the car, shooting straight into their path, causing Seaton to brake and swerve, change direction. The dog would chase for 100 meters or so, and stop only when the car is far off. Thus, it was not difficult to understand why violent Tibetan mastiffs became popular in China's imperial courts, which were brought along the Silk Road in ancient times, as tribute from Tibet. By now, we could see snow-capped mountains. We entered a valley, where the river was wide, and almost clogged with ice. The track was going along the bank of the river. As we gradually gained height, the valley became narrower. The turns became sharper, and the ride became bumpier. The track moved away from the icy river. The track had steeper slopes, and big rocks, coated with orange lichens. Below the rocks, hunks of snow hanged. I felt pressure in my ears. I held my nose, snorted, and cleared them. Then, Seaton stopped. Seaton opened the car, and jumped out. Then, Daniel too exited. Snow. On the dirt track, snow was laying, stretching for about 15 meters. The snow was smoothing the track. Seaton could not drive on the slippery track. As the banks of track were too steep, going around the snow was not possible. Means, they had no option except driving over the snow. Now, as Seaton was busy stepping on the snow, to know how sturdy it was, the author joined Daniel. The author looked at his wristwatch. They were at 5,210 meters above sea level. The snow doesn't look too deep to me. But the danger isn't its depth, but its icy top layer. If we slip off, the car could turn over. Seaton grabbed handfuls of dirt and flinged them across the frozen surface. Nick and Daniel too began doing so. When the snow was spread with dirt, both stayed out of the car to lighten Seaton's load when he drove over the surface. Seaton drove the track without any visible difficulty. The journey was safe for 10 minutes. But then... What happened? Not good, sir. There was again some snow on the track. But this time, Seaton decided to drive round the snow. The slope was steep and full of major rocks. But Seaton overcame the obstacles. He drove a hairpin bend and drove higher, where snow was still there. I checked my watch again as we went up. We were at 5,400 meters. My head began to throb horribly. I drank some water, as it helps in such a situation. We finally reached the top of the pass, at 5,515 meters. It had a large pile of rocks, decorated with white silk scarves, and prayer flags. We took a turn around it, in a clockwise direction, because it is a tradition. Seaton checked the tires on his vehicle. He partially unscrewed the top of the petrol tank, which emitted a loud hiss. Why did he unscrew the tank? As the atmospheric pressure was lower, it allowed the fuel to expand. It sounds dangerous to me. Maybe, sir. But no smoking. My headache soon cleared, as we careered down. At 2 o'clock, we stopped for lunch. We ate hot noodles. Inside a long canvas tent, which was a part of a work camp erected beside a dry salt lake. The plateau is pockmarked with salt flats and brackish lakes, and vestiges of Tethys Ocean. The plateau had salt flats and brackish lakes, and vestiges, meaning signs of Tethys Ocean. Before the continental collision, Tethys Ocean bordered Tibet. Thus, the vestiges of the ocean were visible. At the work camp, men with pickaxes and shovels walked back and forth, in their long sheepskin coats, and salt-encrusted boots. All wore sunglasses, as a stream of blue trucks emerged from the lake, laden with salt. By late afternoon, we reached the small town, Hor. It was on the main east-west highway, that followed the old trade route, from Lhasa to Kashmir. We stopped at a tire shop. My friend Daniel, for returning to Lhasa, found a ride in a truck. Seaton and I greeted him farewell. We had suffered 2 punctures on the drive down from the Salt Lake. Seaton was eager to have them fixed, because he had no spare tires. Besides, the second tire he had changed was replaced by another tire. That was as smooth as my bald head. Hor was a dull, miserable place. There was no vegetation, just dust and rocks, scattered with years of accumulated refuse. It is unfortunate, because this town sat on the shore of Lake Manasarovar, Tibet's most respected stretch of water. Ancient Hindu and Buddhist cosmology pinpoints Manasarovar as the source of 4 great Indian rivers, the Indus, the Ganga, the Sutlej, and the Brahmaputra. Actually, only the Sutlej flows from the lake, but the headwaters of others rise nearby, on the sides of Mount Kailash. We were at some distance from the great mountain, and I was eager to go ahead. But I had to wait. Seaton told me to go and drink some tea in Hor's only cafe. And here I am, drinking tea. Like all the other buildings in town, the cafe was constructed from badly painted concrete, and had 3 broken windows. Although, the good view of the lake from one of the windows compensated for the draft in the author's mind. He was served by a Chinese youth, in military uniform. He spread the grease around the table, with a dirty cloth, and brought a glass and a thermos of tea for him. Half an hour later, Seaton relieved me from my isolated confinement. He drove westwards, towards Mount Kailash. My experience in Hor was completely opposite to accounts I had read of earlier travelers' encounters with Lake Manasarovar. Ekai Kawaguchi, a Japanese monk who arrived there in 1900, was so moved by the sanctity of the lake that he burst into tears. Sanctity means sacredness. Some years later, it had similar effect on Sven Hedden, who was not used to emotional outbursts. When they left, it was dark. After 10:30 p.m., they went to a guest house in Darchin. It was a troubled night. Wandering in the rubbish dump at Hor had set off my cold once more. If I say the truth, my cold had never disappeared with my herbal tea. One of my nostrils was blocked again. As I lay down to sleep, I was not convinced that the other nostril would provide me enough oxygen. My watch told me I was at 4,760 meters. It wasn't higher than Ravu, where I had been gasping every night. Gasping means breathing hard. I had become habitual to these nocturnal disturbances by now, but they still scared me. Tired and hungry, I started breathing through my mouth. After a while, I switched to single nostril power, which seemed to be admitting enough oxygen. But just as I was falling asleep, I woke up suddenly. Something was wrong. My chest felt heavy. I sat up. The movement cleared my nasal passages instantly, and relieved the heaviness of my chest. I was curious. I lay back down, and tried again. Same result. When I was on the point of sleeping, something within me told me not to. It must have been those emergency electrical impulses again, but this time, it was not same as on previous events. On previous events, I had been gasping for breath, but this time, I was not allowed to go to sleep. Sitting up once more immediately made me feel better. I could breathe freely, and my chest was fine. But as soon as I lay down, my sinuses filled, and my chest was odd. Sinuses are cavities, connected to nasal passage. I tried to get support on the wall, but I could not sleep. A little voice inside me was saying that if I tried to sleep, I might never wake up again. So I stayed awake all night. The following morning, Seaton took him to the Darchin Medical College. The medical college was new and looked like a monastery from outside, with a very solid door that led into a large courtyard. We found the consulting room that was dark and cold and occupied by a Tibetan doctor. He had no equipments I had expected. No white coat. He looked like any other Tibetan, with a pullover and a woolly hat. When I explained my sleepless symptoms and my sudden reluctance to lying down, he asked me few questions while feeling the veins in my wrist. He said me through Seaton that it was a cold, an effect of high altitude. I asked him if I would recover enough to be able to do the Korah. He said yes. He walked out with a brown envelope filled with 15 screws of paper. It was a 5-day course of Tibetan medicine. I opened an after-breakfast package and found that it contained a brown powder that I had to take with hot water. It tasted just like cinnamon. But the contents of the lunchtime and dinnertime packages were less identifiable. Both contained small, spherical brown tablets. They looked like sheep dung, but of course, I took them. That night, after my first full-day course, I slept very soundly. Like a log, not a dead man. The author slept like a log, undisturbed. But not like a dead man. When Darchin realized that I was going to be fine, he left me to return to Lhasa. He said, "As a Buddhist, I know that it didn't really matter if you passed away. But, I think, it would be bad for my business." As a Buddhist, Seaton believed that death was not the end of the life. That's why he said that others' death didn't matter. Darchin didn't look bad. It was still dusty, and had heaps of refuse. But the sun shone brilliantly in the clear blue sky, and the Himalayas were visible, with a huge, snow-capped mountain, Girla Mandata, with some clouds over its peak. There were some rudimentary general stores in Darchin, selling Chinese cigarettes, soap, and other basic provisions, and the strings of prayer flags. In front of one store, men gathered in the afternoon for a game of pool. Nearby women washed their hair in the icy water of a stream. Darchin was relaxed and unhurried. But, for me, it came with a remarkable drawback. There were no pilgrims. Pilgrims are the people who visit a sacred place for a religious reason. I had been told that when the pilgrimage season was at peak, The town was bustling with visitors, but there were rarely any pilgrims. It seemed that I was too early. One afternoon, I sat thinking on my options, drinking a tea in Darchan's only cafe. I concluded that I had only limited options. Many people went on the pilgrimage treks, but I didn't want to go alone. The Kora was seasonal, because parts of route were likely to get blocked by snow. I had no idea if snow had cleared or not, but the chunks of snow hanging at the stream discouraged me. Since Seaton had left, I hadn't come across anyone with enough English to answer this question. But then, I met Norbu. Norbu came in and asked me with a gesture if he could sit opposite to me. After ordering a tea, he asked me, "You English?" "Yes, I am." As he was wearing a wind-cheater jacket and metal-rimmed glasses of Western style, I didn't think he was from those parts. "I am a Tibetan, but I work in Beijing, at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, in the Institute of Ethnic Literature. Are you on some sort of field work here?" "Yes, and no. I have come to do the Kora." For many years, I had been writing academic papers about the Kailash Kora and its importance in various works of Buddhist literature. But I have never done the Kora myself. "And why are you here in Darchan?" "I've also come to do the Kora, to write an article about it." We could be a team. Two academics who have escaped from the library. My initial relief on meeting Norbu was decreased when I realized that he was as ill-equipped as me for the pilgrimage. He kept telling me how fat he was, and how hard the Kora is going to be. Very high up. So tiresome to walk. It revealed that he wasn't a practicing Buddhist, but he had enthusiasm, and he was, of course, Tibetan. Although I had originally thought making the journey with devout believers, but now, I decided that perhaps Norbu would be the ideal companion. We can hire some yaks to carry our luggage. I have no intention of lying down all the journey. While doing the Kora, some people lie down as a tradition. Not possible. He collapsed across the table in laughter. It wasn't his style, and anyway, his tummy was too big.